Hello there, you're watching Sky News and the press preview. In the next half hour, we're going to be seeing what's making the headlines with the writer Ellie Mae O'Hagan and the associate editor of the Mail Online, Wallis Simons. So hello to both of you. So let's take a look then at what's on those front pages. And the Daily Mail looks at the case of the convicted breast surgeon Ian Patterson with the headline, "Why did the NHS fail to stop butcher surgeon?" The Daily Mirror headlines the same story, saying Patterson may have needlessly mutilated at least 1,000 patients. The Telegraph says the NHS has been accused of a cover-up which let the rogue surgeon ruin the lives of hundreds of women over more than a decade. The Guardian says the NHS has paid out £9 million to victims of the surgeon, who it says was described as being like God. The Times says a key suspect in an alleged bomb plot foiled by police in London had previously been freed by the authorities after being accused of travelling to join IS. The Financial Times says the new figures showing the depth of the slowdown of the British economy surprised markets and economists. And The Sun reports on the marriage of Jamie and Louise Redknapp. So let's chat through those stories with Ellie Mae O'Hagan and Wallis Simons. And one very grim story on most of the front pages. You've picked out The Guardian's take on it to kick off with. NHS pays £9 million to victims of rogue surgeon. And this really is an appalling story, isn't it? That's
right. I mean, this actually it's a horror story, isn't it? That the idea that you have a surgeon who will carry out needlessly life-changing operations on people is just stunning. And the fact that it happened to more than 1,000 women.
They believe, yeah.
They believe is outrageous. But The Guardian is right to point the finger at the NHS. The NHS had to pay 9 or 10 million in compensation secretly to victims of the rogue surgeon. And I think the real scandal of this story is the way in which the NHS covered up this scandal for decades. And the Mail outlines 4 ways in which they covered it up. First of all, allegedly, they tried to block a full recall of his breast cancer patients. He botched an operation in 1996 that almost killed a patient and faced no lasting consequences. 2 whistleblowers were ignored by NHS bosses, and then any investigations that did take place took place in secrecy, so that his reputation would be protected. This is absolutely outrageous, and so this never happens again. This sort of behaviour by the NHS bosses must be rooted out.
Well, yes, and the Daily Telegraph also raises those allegations of a cover-up, and certainly a huge number of questions to be asked about how this surgeon managed to carry out these operations on such a scale for so long.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we were talking in the earlier section about how I was saying that I think it's quite standard behaviour of lots of big social institutions to cover up wrongdoing. You know, I've worked on the Hillsborough disaster, and that was an enormous 23-year cover-up. And I think really across all social institutions, not just the NHS, there needs to be more transparency and accountability for the people in power. I mean, this man, you know, he had the trust of these women. They were incredibly vulnerable. They trusted him with their lives, and he mutilated them, and it's an absolutely appalling story.
Well, yes. And we should just focus on the victims, shouldn't we? The Telegraph actually pictures one of them. This is an appalling thing for these women to go through, to firstly be told that in some cases something's wrong with them that wasn't at all, and others it was exaggerated, and certainly a huge number of completely unnecessary operations, and as you say, life-changing. To go through that process and then find out it was unnecessary it beggars belief, doesn't it?
That's right, and of course there are 2 dimensions to this, to the injuries that these women have suffered. First of all, there's obviously the physical one, but also there's a psychological one of putting yourself at the mercy of somebody that you trust and having him, you know, as you say, you know, tell you that you're dying and you're not, and then carry out an operation that you didn't need. This is really appalling behaviour, and in a way he's a second Harold Shipman. In a way he's sort of in that sort of league, isn't he?
Well, people have raised that comparison, not least because of the scale of it, but also the kind of incomprehension and why someone would carry out this kind of terrible act. There are questions over motive.
Yes, and I wonder, you know, if one of the reasons why it took so long for the NHS to act is that it's just simply unbelievable that somebody would do this. I mean, it's just astonishing that he even did it. And I must say, you know, the young woman that's pictured telling her story, good for her. I mean, that's incredibly brave. Incredibly brave that she not only went through such a trauma, but now that she's been able to speak out. I mean, I really admire her bravery.
But just one final word. I do worry about an instinct to let the NHS off the hook too easily on this, because everybody loves the NHS and everybody wants it to succeed. However, if we sort of pass the buck and say, well, cover-ups exist all over the place, and it was such a big scale, it was such a large scale crime that the NHS weren't aware of it, didn't know. Then, if we allow them to get away with it, then we won't really address it, and we need to hold them to account.
That's not passing the buck, is it? I don't think it's passing the buck to say that this happens in other social institutions. I think it's just saying that we need to change the law to make sure that this doesn't happen anywhere, rather than saying, oh well, it's fine that it happened in the NHS. Obviously, it isn't fine.
Changing the law.
It's appalling. Well, in terms of the transparency laws, the things that public services, the way that they're held to account in public, I think there needs to be a review of how we manage all of our public services in terms of what is transparent and available to the public.
Well, there are calls tonight for a public inquiry. More answers might come out about those allegations of a cover-up, and to make sure that the system is watertight so it won't happen in future. Obviously, that's the wish. Let's move on to a completely different story. This is inside the Times. This is the latest growth figures that came out today, reflecting on the beginning of the year. What did they tell us?
Well, I think I chose this story, and I think the reason I find it interesting is because I think it relates a lot to the general election that we're seeing at the moment. I think a lot of people, in this country voted Brexit because they were unhappy with their current circumstances, and they were signalling that they wanted a change. And I think Theresa May has called an election because things are as good for her as they're going to get at the moment. And I think there is a lot of evidence that living standards are starting to slide again. And so that makes me worry that the change that people wanted by voting for Brexit actually won't come, and actually their living standards will continue to deteriorate.
OK, let me just point out the details, because the growth figures did come in at 0.3%, so there was growth, but it was lower than expected, wasn't it? Do you think that Ellie's got a point there, that this could be a turning point for the economy, and Theresa May was keen to get in fast before the economy went south?
Not at all. I mean, I think that people voted for Brexit not because they were unhappy with their circumstances, but because they wanted to leave the EU, quite frankly. And I think that it's true that this is surprising news. Mainly the reason that it's surprising is because we've become so used to good news about the economy since the Brexit vote, with inward investment up, with jobs booming, and generally, forecasts have been improved rather than made more negative. This is the first bit of
inflation also up, and
that's true.
The pound is really
the pound is, I'm not saying that it's not going to be a rocky road, and of course it is going to be a rocky road, but I think that just because it's going to be a rocky road and we're going to have dips means that our future isn't bright. I think that outside the European Union our future is going to be very bright and very, as Theresa May would say, strong and stable.
I couldn't disagree more, and I wish I could agree, but I couldn't.
You can agree.
No, I could, but I would be not honest. I think that, I've done a lot of work on Brexit trade deals. I think that we're going to end up in a worse situation economically. I think we'll make trade deals with bigger economies who have more power than us, and they will demand conditions from us that are not favourable. I think there'll be a lot of jobs lost, particularly in the financial sector.
There aren't many economies bigger than us, though, are there?
Yes, okay. China, the EU is 7 times bigger than us alone, the US, all of these economies will be going into trade deals with, and they'll be able to demand pretty much whatever they want because they're bigger and more powerful than us. And I think that's a really dangerous situation to be in, but that's what we're doing.
I'm going to whiz on so that we don't relive all of the Brexit arguments right now. But let's move on to President Trump. And he will be celebrating his 100 days in office tomorrow. And the Times there has done a double-page spread. Clearly, his fans, many of them still love him, but there is still some division, according to anecdotal evidence, if nothing else. There's still plenty of people not so happy.
That's right. I mean, the quote that jumped out for me was that President Trump called the 100-day milestone a ridiculous standard, which sort of suggests that he knows he hasn't done brilliantly well in the first 100 days. Interestingly, he said that he loved his previous life and that he's surprised that being president wasn't quite as easy as being an old, rich, sort of lecherous businessman. But, you know, there have been a lot of problems and failures and disasters, really, in the Trump presidency, and the Times points out a few of them, including famously the travel ban on Muslim-majority countries being blocked so spectacularly. In my mind, the only thing that he's done successfully so far, controversially perhaps, is the North Korea moves, because I think we're finally starting to see some movement and some action on North Korea from China, and that wouldn't have happened without his rattling the sabre. Well,
yes, because there are lots of things that he did say would happen that haven't. Obamacare is another example as well, and he's also changed his mind. He's for example, intervening in Syria as well, despite saying that he wasn't going to play the world's policeman when he was campaigning. So he surprised people as well as not always being able to fulfil his promises.
Yeah, you know, as you were talking, I was listing his disasters. I was trying to think of something that I think he's done well, and I can't think of anything. I think he's had a pretty terrible 100 days. I don't really see much evidence that it's going to improve. You know, I mean, there's already been quite a lot of resignations and disgrace of the people that he's appointed as well. Yeah, I mean, the fact that he was elected at all is quite remarkable. But I was actually in the US for his inauguration, and I travelled around a lot and spoke to lots of different voters. And I really feel that the more interesting story about Trump is not that lots of people voted for him, but actually lots of people who would have voted Democrat didn't vote because they'd lost the ability to believe that politics could do anything positive for them. And I think that, for me, is the really interesting story about America that is still yet to be told.
And perhaps a lot of politicians around the world need to learn from as well. OK, we're going to take a break, but don't go anywhere. We're going to talk about whether Theresa May will get the final say on the Tory manifesto. That's up next.
In May 2007, Madeleine McCann disappeared from her family's holiday apartment. It's a case that has haunted police for a decade. But has the investigation been flawed from the very start? Join me, Martin Brunt, as I explore the anatomy of a failed investigation. Searching for Madeleine, Tuesday at 10 on Sky 1.
The chase is on with brand new episodes on Challenge.
That's fantastic.
It certainly is.
Time to face the chaser.
I'm gonna catch you.
I want you back here.
Can anyone outrun the chasers?
Well, this is a sprint right now.
I get it now.
With brand new episodes.
Oh dear, oh dear.
The Chase, weeknights at 9 on Challenge.
The Sky Store flash sale on every weekend this month.
Let's go.
Let's go. Ta-da! You'll find the latest and greatest movies and box sets.
Impressive.
All available to buy and keep at an incredible 50% off.
Fantastic news.
So you can go big and stay at home with the entertainment you love.
Okay, got it.
But be quick. With brand new half-price offers, you'll need to be fast to catch the latest discounts.
Poof, we are gone.
The Sky Store flash sale every weekend this month.
Live the life, RX. Lexus. Experience amazing.
The mega deals are on at Currys PC World. Save £200 and get free next day delivery on these large capacity 9 kilo LG washing machines. Now only $399. And save £120 on the Dyson V8 Animal. Up to 40 minutes runtime at our lowest price, $349. Plus, you can buy now and choose to pay nothing for 6 months with your plan. Flexible credit you control. Apply online or in-store today. At Currys PC World, we start with you.
Crikey, now that is out of this world. No, not you, mate. This corner sofa with shades is just $1,599 in the Harvey's spring sale. Galactical! And this 100% leather sofa with recliner is only $1,199. But hurry, these extra bank holiday specials won't be around forever. In fact, they'll only be around till Tuesday. Harvey's, incredible furniture at incredible prices. Guaranteed.
Hi, how can I help you?
Hi, it's for my daughter. She's going travelling and...
Of course. Something portable? This iPad Pro is as powerful as many laptops.
Hey, Dad.
just a sec, darling.
How about this? i5 processor, weighs under 1.5 kilos. The new MacBook Pro.
Dad, I know what I'd like.
A MacBook Pro?
Buy your Apple product now and choose to pay nothing for 6 months with your plan. Flexible credits you control. Apply online or in-store today. At Currys PC World, we start with you.
Welcome back to the press preview, where we're taking a look at the morning papers with Ellie Mae O'Hagan and Jake Wallis Simons. And we're delving into The Sun next, because they've got a story about who's going to make the decisions on the Tory manifesto. So what are they saying here?
Well, apparently this is the great story, actually, from James Forsyth, that Theresa May is willing to take ideas on the manifesto from her cabinet and her top team, but she's made very clear that she's going to be the person to make the final decision, not them. And this says a lot about her style of leadership, which very much is leading from the front. You know, it's perhaps quite authoritarian. It's very, very strong. And, you know, I can't go any further without mentioning Margaret Thatcher, because it's very much evocative of her style. And it's divided opinion, really. A lot of people are really very annoyed about it in Westminster. But I think that, you know, as her soaring popularity in the polls demonstrates, the country is crying out for a strong leader now more than ever.
And this is a mock-up that The Sun has done there of everyone gathering around her laptop. But she definitely wants to give the impression that she's the one in control, doesn't she, Ellie?
Yes, I think she does. And I think what worries me about the upcoming general election is that I think it's an attempt by Theresa May to avoid accountability. And this also suggests that she wants to avoid accountability, that actually she wants to do everything with as little scrutiny as possible. And given that Britain is going into the two of its most crucial years in probably a century, if not more, in terms of the Brexit negotiations, I find that really worrying. I do think it's, you know, from a less sort of political point of view and just more of an observational point of view, I do think, I agree with you, it's very interesting in terms of what it reveals about her as a leader, that she's not a kind of front woman, that she actually does seem to be the boss making all of the decisions in terms of...
She's leading from the front, isn't she?
Yeah, in terms of the direction that the Conservative Party is taking.
OK, I'm going to whiz us on. We're going to try and squeeze in a few more stories. Here, for example, on the front of the Telegraph, a story that has taken your interest about a figure that we haven't heard about for a bit, actually, Yanis Varoufakis. What's he up to now?
Well, he's writing a memoir and...
Former Greek finance minister?
Yeah, he was the former Greek finance minister for the radical left party Syriza, which promised to end Greece's anti-austerity programme, went into negotiations with the EU where it was effectively crushed by the EU. And then basically they ended up accepting most of the EU's reform, and Varoufakis resigned in anger. The party, Syriza, sort of split. There was a split off. And this is his memoir about his time as finance minister, and I just think it's going to be absolutely fascinating.
But the story that the Telegraph has picked out from it here is the revelation that the powerful German finance minister, Wolfgang Schäuble, admitted candidly to Varoufakis that if he was Greek, he wouldn't sign up to the deal because Greece was being shafted by Germany in this austerity deal. And the advice that Varoufakis draws from this for Theresa May is don't give an inch when it comes to negotiating with the EU, and particularly with the Germans in the upcoming negotiations. You know, stick to your guns and don't be played for a fool, because he obviously feels that his country was.
For me, I think it shows just how outrageous the austerity programme in Greece was. I think it completely battered the people of that country. It was the way that they were treated by the Troika at that time was just appalling and barbaric, and their sovereignty was not respected. And I think it shows that even the EU knew at the time that it was behaving badly. And really, the real victims of this is not people like Varoufakis, who's still a very successful man. It's the ordinary Greek people who really deserved better. And so that's why I think this is an interesting
Thank God we're
story.
leaving the EU.
Well, I don't agree with that.
Okay. Yeah, there was too much agreement going on there. We had to get things back to normal at the end. A quick look at this story. Father of three wins legal fight for free sarnies.
Well, when I covered the terror attacks in Stockholm, I took a BA short-haul flight and was astonished to find that the only food on offer was these M&S sandwiches. Now, not that BA food is particularly something to look forward to, but to have to shell out for M&S sandwiches is really quite a slap in the face. And this brave couple, believe it or not, took British Airways to the small claims court because they'd bought flights expecting there to be free food, and there wasn't, and they've won. And so British Airways is now having to delay plans to roll this out throughout their flight network. So, a good victory for the little people, I think.
Absolutely, and I hope they were nice sandwiches at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I find it amazing that this is how this is the thing that they chose to go to court about, but, fair play. I'm going to get free sandwiches next time on BA, so good for them.
On that note, we're out of time, I'm afraid, but lovely to see you both. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.